Good, I guess, afternoon to everyone, because I'm used to doing this at 6:30 on a Friday night. Now I'm all screwed up. But anyway, we shall proceed with the show. Not a real happy show, I guess you'd say. It's kind of a bummer, but not unexpected behavior from a lot of our representatives and leaders in Jefferson City. So, without further ado, let me start the recording, and we shall proceed with the Freedom Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining me again this week. I got a lot of stuff to say, right? I got a lot of things to say. I really do. And they're not very nice because of just what I saw yesterday. Now, I didn't get to spend but 4 hours or so at the Capitol yesterday. I had to go get my denture fixed again, and so that took a little time. But by the time they got through all the formalities, they didn't start on the House floor till 10 o'clock in the morning. So by the time I got there, things had just kind of started, really. Okay, so there's that. And and what I watched was unconstitutional bill after unconstitutional bill after unconstitutional bill file through, get voted on, and pass through. A lot of them were Senate bills, you know. And so we had a lot of stuff for tax credits for, you know, certain groups of people. And, you know, certain businesses. It was a lot of, okay, so let's say power distribution, so electrical companies, people doing work on, you know, expanding broadband. Democrats and Republicans alike were saying, oh, yeah, you know, they shouldn't have to pay sales tax on their equipment or all these other things. And I'm like, okay. At first, I'm like, you know, I'm sitting there, as a human being, you're like, oh, somebody doesn't have to pay sales tax. Cool. But then when you think about it, constitutionally, it is unconstitutional because everyone should get the same break. Everyone should be covered equally. If you don't have to pay sales tax, why should the person next to you have to pay sales tax? It's pretty common sense when you think about it. And that's the tricky thing, really, because if you think about it constitutionally, it is common sense that any bill that just picks a certain group of people or certain type of business or whatever gets a certain perk, maybe, you know, gets some help with their tax. Walmart's a perfect example. Every town they go into, they get a tax abatement. If their tax abatement ends, they'll up and leave. They do that a lot. So Walmart gets like 3%. I don't remember how. They get a certain percent of all the tax that they pay to that local community back. Now, you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound fair. It's really not. Why does a certain company get tax abatements? Well, the reason they do that is because they bring in so much tax revenue to the town, that the towns will willingly do it. But on the other hand, they will tax you for every silly little thing that they can come up with. They will expand their borders to get more people into the city limits, to get the tax revenue. They will come up with new ideas on how to spend your money. But they will turn around to a big business and give them a tax abatement. Kind of unconstitutional, also highly unfair, but that's the way government operates today. If you're in a certain class, then you get special treatment. If you're just a normal, average, everyday citizen for the most part, you don't get squat, except, higher tax revenues foisted upon you, may take some freedom away, take some property rights away, a lot of different things, but you don't seem to get anything positive. Now, if you're in that select group, you'll get something positive, but they have to steal it from somebody else to give it to that select group, right? They have to take, because as far as I know, I have yet to see a money tree behind any city hall building, behind the Capitol in Jefferson City. I mean, I've been to D.C., around the Capitol building and the White House. I don't see money trees anywhere where they can just go pluck it off and say, okay, we're going to fund this for this group of people. I don't ever see that. I've never seen a money tree. So they're stealing from one set of people. Stealing is the operative word here, is the key word. They're stealing from one group and handing it off to another. And then when the state does it, when they pass it through in a piece of legislation, they're doing the same thing. They're just taking it for one group and handing it to somebody else, or giving them a break, which means the burden will at some point fall onto you. Almeria says they count on us to be free-range ATMs. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analogy for the way we're being treated. It seems a logical conclusion to come to, that we are treated as free-range ATMs. But sooner or later, they get to our 15-minute cities and all this other stuff. We won't be free-range ATMs. We'll just be, I guess free within the city that you live, but leaving that city for more than 15 minutes will become quite problematic for you. But yes, we are treated as cash cows. We're treated as ATMs. We're just the common masses who they depend on to A, keep voting them into power, and B, keep taking everything they can from us, all in the guise of making it look good. And, the other thing that gets me is like, there was some facility in Kansas City that 80% of the parts are made, they're non-nuclear parts, but they make 80% of the non-nuclear parts for nuclear missiles. And they're looking for some kind of tax credit for them. And it passed. And the Democrats and Republicans both got up. So many jobs coming in. Another way you can get jobs to come in here? How about just cutting out the income tax? You could eliminate corporate income tax and convince a whole lot of companies to come in. A lot of states do that because the amount of money they generate from the corporate income tax compared to any other tax, there's a big difference. Now, I would also really like to see the income tax just come off of everybody. Just eliminate a state income tax on people and corporations. That's the constitutional way to do it. But it is a way to create jobs if you want to say, okay, we're eliminating the corporate income tax. You get all kinds of businesses coming in. A lot of states do that, and it's worked for them. But here in the state of Missouri, we just give tax credits to preferred sectors of the industry. Electrical, technology, like, IT type of broadband service. They're gonna dole those out. But yeah, again, if you would just, I don't know, cut the taxes, cut the spending, cut the budget, you may not have to pass all these unconstitutional bills because people have more money to operate, whether they're just going to work somewhere and coming home, or they're a business owner and they're trying to grow. They want to employ more people. They want to reduce their costs, maybe make their product cheaper. How do you do that? You relieve their tax burden. It's very simple. It's very simple. I mean, apparently it's very a complicated thing for these people to wrap their heads around, but to all of us who have to deal with them and their decisions, it's pretty common sense to us on how we feel about, or how we interact with government, how our government interacts with us. In reality, we shouldn't have to interact with them really hardly at all. But because we're so unconstitutional, and because only certain groups of people get certain privileges from elected officials, the rest of us get yoked with this burden of taxation and overregulation and all these other things. And we shouldn't have to worry about that. You and I should be able to go to work and make a living and retain a lot of the money that we earn through our labor and bring that home and save it, spend it, whatever we want to do, without some bean counter, without some bureaucrat saying, well, you have to give your fair share, which is arbitrary. Fair share according to who? According to them or according to us? Because fair share, depending on if you're talking to government or you're talking to an individual, there's a big difference between fair share. I think a lot of people can agree on that. I think that you shouldn't be taking any of my money. And they think they should get 8, 10, 12%. Federal government, they think, between all the taxes you pay, you're losing half your paycheck, right? I mean, they're robbing half of your earnings from you every week, every month, every year. They're taking it all. They're taking every bit of it they can. And there are too many people that have gotten way too comfortable with the thought that government knows best how to spend your money and how to tell you how to live and what programs to create to help, again, a specific class or industry out, whether it's airlines, banks, whatever. Somehow these people have become way more important than the sovereign individual just trying to do their day-to-day. Almeria says right now we're paying about 75% of our income to taxation. That sounds right. Whatever number it is, it's way too high. And, again, if we have to operate with some kind of taxation, then eliminate the IRS, eliminate the income tax. Everything's based on a flat tax of 10%. So anytime you go to the store, you buy a product, you pay a 10% tax on the total at the register, and you go on. You're not having to interact with some thief. You're not having to interact with some IRS agent. You're not having to interact with a tax preparer. You're not having you've cut down the amount of interaction you've had with the government, because your interaction with the government is at the cash register when you pay your 10%. They have crunched the numbers, okay? They know for a fact that if they eliminated the IRS and went to a 10% flat tax on purchases only, that they would actually generate more revenue that way than they do with the system currently in place. The problem is they lose control of the people. If you can steal from their paycheck, make them go through these fiery hoops to get their taxes done every year and then report all their earnings and do all this stuff, and then they have the ability to audit you, maybe steal from you, maybe throw you in jail if they feel like you cheated them out of money. And then The same government that wants to cut down the penalty fees on credit cards because they feel like the penalty fees for late payments or whatever other interest and things that these companies accrue is too much. But I heard an example the other day. So let's say you owed $500 for 2021. You get to 2 years later with penalties and interest, it's going to be over $1,000. So it's doubled in 2 years. That's perfectly okay to them, right? They're perfectly fine with that. But you can't own a company like a credit card company and charge late fees and all that, and some idiot in government's going to tell you can't do that. And the only difference is that the government is in charge of the IRS is a government body. They make their own rules. The head of the IRS is an appointed person. They're not elected. They're simply doing the bidding of whoever's in charge at the federal level so they can keep their job. And a credit card company, they have a board of directors. They have all, they're a corporation. Now, of course, they have to be licensed and all this stuff to operate. So they have to pay their extortion fee to the government in order to be able to operate. And when you do that, government takes control. That tends to put shackles on you and attaches you to the government. So when you're not operating in a way that pleases them, they're going to use whatever tools necessary to or make laws to restrict on your late payments or late payment fees, other interests and other fees. They're going to regulate you into a box. This is how you can operate. But the government can operate with a negative income in a deficit year after year after year after year after year, and nothing happens to them. So you have that. Now we move to the Missouri House, or the Missouri Capitol, Jefferson City, right? We move to that, and they're trying to get, a Missouri Freedom Initiative, along with some other groups, tried to get gold and silver through. It got to the last day of the session, which was yesterday, Friday the 17th, and oopsie, it didn't even make the floor. Last year it made the floor, and then leadership let the Democrats take up an hour and a half asking the dumbest questions and saying the dumbest things. MAGA gold, Civil War gold, Nazi gold, saying the dumbest things, and then they went to recess, and that was it. This year, didn't even make it to the floor. Now, there were rumors that Governor Parson was going to veto that bill, and there was also some things going around that if he didn't get the child tax credit that he wanted, then gold and silver would also not go through. Talked to some representatives after the session was over. After the session's over, like us, common men can go onto the House floor. Talked to a few reps. They said it was Patterson. It was Majority Floor Leader Patterson was the one that chose that bill to not make it on the floor for a vote and send it on to the governor's desk. Okay, so we keep having a problem with leadership wanting to do things that aren't good for us, right? They're fine with giving tax credits to, again, select groups of people. That's fine. We'll do that all day long because those people might donate to my campaign. Gold and silver, I guess it doesn't. I mean, even though monetarily, financially, it would be good for them. It's good for everybody, so it's going to be good for them. But it's going to help the common man. That doesn't interest us right now. We're not. They have no interest in doing the constitutional or moral thing. They would assume that us, again, common folk, just wallow around in the crap that they lay down. But we have people like O'Connell and, or is it O'Donnell? I think it's O'Donnell, who tried his best to derail the bill. We have people in the Senate. We have people in the House who are there to serve their own self-interest. So my question is, as grassroots organizations, should we deal with trying to get good legislation through? Should we only deal with trying to kill bad bills? Or do we make it our job to make sure that the whole lot of these unconstitutional folks lose their seat in the Senate or the House? Or if they're trying to climb the political ladder to Secretary of State or Attorney General or Governor or whatever, that we just root them out and end their political career. Because if they're in Jeff City, phone calls, emails, TV shows, TV cameras, whatever, doesn't seem to faze them. Now, they had a lot of support. Heck, I think they had 15 Democrats that were willing to sign on and vote yes on that bill. And leadership was like, I'm not interested. So Patterson is going to be the new Speaker of the House. I can't remember who's going to be the new Majority Floor Leader. I don't know with these people around if we can get anything good done anymore. The rats and the rhinos have infiltrated so deeply into that building, along with lobbyists. So the corruption and greed is so thick in there that they seem to be mirroring Washington, D.C., which is why I've called them D.C. wannabes on some of my shows. They seem to be D.C. wannabes. And with the lobbyists there, that makes that goal very attainable. Now, are you ever going to get rid of lobbyists? I mean, that's just nigh impossible, because you have lobbyist groups there in the interest of, again, some certain class of people, businesses or certain minorities or whatever. But then you have other lobbyist groups that are there trying to get good, liberty-loving legislation passed, hopefully constitutional legislation passed, because sometimes even those folks will be fine with their bill being tacked in to other bills, making it an unconstitutional bill. So you have to worry about that. Yeah, Almeria says, ask Governor Greitens what happens when you go after lobbyists. I mean, it's just, I just don't have, maybe that's just me and I'm pessimistic. And that might be the case. But I don't have any faith that we're going to get anything done with these people that are in there right now. A whole lot of them need to go. Can we get rid of a lot of these people? I'm not even sure we can do that, because the people, the voters, tend to keep putting these people in. It's very hard to get an incumbent out of their seat here in the state of Missouri. It's very hard to beat an incumbent in this state, because I think people just recognize the name and check the box because there's an R or a D behind their name. So if you're going to try to unseat an incumbent, your message better be really good, and you better be able to get people to listen and understand. And you better make them interested. If you're going to go into that building and you're going to try to be someone like Mike Moon, then you better be able to relay the information that, you have to make them understand. Listen, I know that I'm there to represent you, but I'm also there to make sure that I uphold and defend the Constitution, which is in the oath of office that I take. So, yes, you are there to represent the people, but you're there to represent them in a way that they retain their liberties. Not that a certain portion of them get a tax cut, a tax credit, leaving the other half of your district out in the cold. You're there to defend and uphold the Constitution. It's just like me. I'm a backup shop steward. And the last union conference that I went to, they tell you, yes, you are there to help out your fellow members, but you're there and you are upholding the contract. So you have union members and the company have to abide by the contract. You're there to uphold the contract, which is supposed to protect the workers. If you're in government, you're supposed to be upholding the Constitution. So that means you're protecting your constituents' natural rights. And instead, most of these people want to go up there and pat themselves on the back, make themselves look good, so they keep earning votes. Mike Moon is on an island by himself because the man knows the message. He understands his role. He will get out and say it on the floor of the Senate. He will say it to his constituents. But his constituents seem to be happy with that. And that's great. Yeah, Tom March says very few were constitutional. Yeah, all the bills that I heard yesterday were unconstitutional. Every single one. I think except, I'm not sure about SJR 78 because I didn't read it. It was all about, keeping illegals from voting and getting rid of ranked choice voting. And I think Tom and I agree that they should have another bill that says the primaries that money comes out of the party's money and not taking it from taxpayers. I think we should have a bill like that says no more primaries paid for by taxation. You want to have a primary, pay for it yourself. But that would be a hard one to get through. That would be super hard bill to get through. But it is true. Tom, I wholeheartedly agree when Tom says that. That says no more primaries. What the heck am I doing here? My screen is going all stupid on me. But we just have the parties are just the Republican and Democrat parties are corrupt. They're corrupt to the core. Yes, I know the Missouri GOP got a new, got new leadership, right? And maybe that'll work out, maybe it won't. But I still find those people being apologists for certain senators or House members, representatives. I still see them being apologists for some of these people when they pass unconstitutional stuff all the time. So it's like, what are you doing? I want to I want to have faith that maybe you're trying to vet your candidates and you're trying to get the best possible representation in Jefferson City. I want to believe that. I want to believe that that's what you're doing. But when I hear you mentioning certain people who act ignorant and then you leave a select couple out, sorry, they were, they're in the same group. They were doing the same thing. Why are you leaving them out? Oh, that's right, because you're working for their campaign. So you want to elevate them and make everybody else look bad. But if they're just as guilty of certain things, you have to call them out. Senator Eigels running for governor, but he voted for trash SB 727, that school choice bill or whatever the heck it was. Highly unconstitutional, awful bill. Voted for it. Needs to be called out. We can't ignore that. That's a silly thing to do. If these people are acting in a way that violates their oath, then you have to call them out. You can't just keep going, well, that's how we got here. Listen, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I'm just as guilty about this as anybody else. Right? I'm not saying that I'm above reproach or that I have acted in this way a lot. But taking a step back, seeing what's going on around me, it's just like, okay, I've been burying my head in the sand. I really have. I've been burying my head in the sand this whole time and not being honest with myself. Yeah, now Miria says, I'm at the point and my vote no longer counts in anything. I think a lot of people feel that way. Now, a lot of those people still go vote, But they don't feel like when they see the results of the elections and when they see the actions of the representatives and senators, whether it's in state or D.C., which is a dumpster fire. I think Washington, D.C. should now be called Washington, D.F. It's just Washington dumpster fire. But, yeah, you see what goes on. And, sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not voting for the incumbent. This person seems to be more rational and understands what their role is, what their job is, right? And those people just have a heck of a time getting elected because, again, people are too used to someone coming and making promises to them that they can't keep. Campaign promises that they have no interest in really doing, or they're just one person out there trying to do this, and they can't build a community of people inside that building to work on that. They just, there's nothing wrong with being an individual and trying to get good constitutional legislation done. But people tend to vote for those who make really good promises. And they say the word Constitution about 60 times in a speech, and they probably never even opened the book. They've never opened that thing up and read how they're supposed to act. But I don't know. I know there are cities and the counties that try to pass, and even some states that are trying to pass legislation that says there's no more electronic ballot counting machines. Everything's paper and it's going to be hand counted. And I have absolutely no problem with that because I believe that is the most effective way of trying to ensure that votes are counted accurately. And it leaves a lot less room for error. Now, there's always human error in everything, right? But when you're not able to hack a machine and change something where you can't see it, you can't even tell when the ballot comes, the official tallies come out. And if somebody went in there and screwed with numbers before it starts, you can't tell by pulling out the tape that comes out of there. You can't see it. And so you're putting a lot of faith in computers and for people in government to be honest with you. And I think we've all figured out by now, you can't really trust these people to be honest with you, that everything they said or everything that they've done is on the up and up. I can't. Now, I still vote in local elections. I'll probably vote in state elections. Do I have a lot of faith? No, I don't. But I will do it. Because as Tom so perfectly states, that is the one time per every 2 years or 4 years that you are actually in a democracy, right? Because we hear the word democracy being thrown around all the time, and we're supposed to be a constitutional republic, but everybody thinks democracy now. That is the one time that you are part of a democracy, is when you're voting, right? That is the one time you're doing that, which is correct. That is absolutely correct. But trying to get the people to understand it, because, again, it's real easy to point fingers at the politicians in whatever government building they're in. Oh, that's super easy. It's super easy to armchair quarterback all those people in that building who don't do what's right. Again, the people that put them there have to hold themselves accountable too, have to admit to their mistakes, have to be willing to admit that the person they put in there was not the right person. That's it. At the end of the day, it's all on us, which is how the founders stated it. You want to be free, then it's on you. Yes, there are rules for elected people on how to operate, but we have how many alphabet agencies that are unconstitutional, that are all appointed? You can't kick those people out. And people have been comfortable with the status quo. I hate to use that's That word gets thrown away around a lot. Status quo and mainstream, but it's true. People have been very comfortable with the status quo, right? That's just how it is. And we just keep electing people that don't have, at the end of the day, they don't have our interest in mind. Yeah, Casey Rich says we're supposed to be a constitutional representative republic, but we've been an oligarchy for quite a while. Yeah, that's also spot on. Very true. Very true. But yeah, I just don't have much faith in a lot of people in Jefferson City anymore either. And I don't know how to solve it. To me, it comes down to working on educating the voters. And that's it. Educating the voters and getting them to understand. I mean, really take to heart what you're saying to them. Now, sometimes that takes a special kind of person that can get in front of a large group and make them understand what's at stake, what their responsibilities are, and making them understand that people have to go back to this belief in that they're sovereign individuals, that they're not part of some hive mind, that they have to think like everybody else and act like everybody else. They have to go back to thinking that they have certain rights that no one can take from them. It doesn't matter who their name is or what their name is, what letters behind their name, what bureaucracy they work in. Their rights are unalienable, which means you can't take them away. They also have to be educated and come to grips with the fact that if you're going to elect someone to uphold and to defend the Constitution, maybe those people should know what's in that document. Maybe they should know what's in that document first before they can come to you and claim that they're constitutional. I think if you're going to vet candidates, that you give each and every one of them, I bet you dollars to donuts that Tom Martz would write up a quiz and email it to anybody, any central, any central committees, anything. Like, hey, you want to test your, people who want to run for office, candidates? Here you go. Hand them this Constitution test. Tell them, we're going to take your phone. You go sit at that desk over there, take your phone, put it on a desk, and, make sure they don't have a copy of the Constitution with them. Now take the quiz. See how much they know. Because I would venture a guess that most of them, if they read it and know it, are more likely to act within its boundaries than those who never really pick it up and look at it and just like to throw that word around. Now, some of them might go, oh, I'm going to study up and then pass the test and get in there. But I would say that you have a better shot at getting actual constitutional candidates into that building if you vet them, if you add that to your vetting process, right? And send a signal out. That puts out a signal like, hey, we're literally looking for constitutional candidates here. Not some schmuck that can, spout out all this really cool lingo. No, we want to know that you actually know the document. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar, but if you have a good grasp of it and you know what you're supposed to be doing when you're in that building, if we just had several people who every time, or at least 90% of the time, would vote no on a bill because it's got bills crammed together or whatever, and they're omnibus bills or whatever, it's an automatic no. That would go such a long way into fixing the problem. Kyle Woodland says, "Let's play COD Warzone." I can't do that right now, Kyle, in the middle of a live stream. But if we just had several Mike Moons that just says this bill's unconstitutional, nope, we could at least slow down the progress in the path that we're going right now. We could go a heck of a long way in slowing the momentum down. At least we can't even slow the momentum down right now. We are on a very quick path on a totalitarian type regime, just the massive loss of your liberty. And people don't want to admit that. Missouri, hey, in Missouri, we're a Republican state. Okay. What has that gotten us so far? He says, Casey Rich says, I don't think it's as much as who we vote for as much as what happens to them once they get in office. Cough, cough, Justin Sparks. Yeah. If they go to Hillbilly Thunderbutt's building and get in, with the lobbyists all hanging out and stuff, that's another problem. Yeah, Hillbilly Thunderbutt, I saw him yesterday. Of course, he was hanging out. I wish I could quote the highly not radio-friendly tweet. Now, Speaker Tim Jones had a response to a tweet yesterday, and I can't say it on the radio. There's no bad words, but there is one word that some people would probably not like being on the radio, so I can't say it. But I'll try to edit it out because I took a screenshot of it and sent it to Gary and Tom because I was like, that's actually really funny, even though Tim Jones is another one that I don't trust. Let me put my Sears back on here and I'll check it out. Let's see. Okay, so it starts out, Caleb Rowden tweets out, this week the Missouri Senate spent almost 50 straight hours attempting to pass IP reform. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful and sent the bill to the House. Like yesterday, the House attempted to pass the same bill back to us. There's no way the Senate can get it done in 8 hours. So Mark Cox, I believe is a radio host, put, if you find your, I'll just say cojones, be sure and tweet about that too, but at least your lobbyists are happy. And then Speaker Tim Jones goes, I'm fairly certain Scott Vaughn is holding them. Now, I almost fell out of my chair when I read that. I was like, dang. Wow. Yeah, Tom March is right. I could have said gonads. But anyway, I just didn't want to say the one word. Again, I'm not a big fan of Tim Jones, but that was great because it seems like there are a few more reps out there or people who have been involved in government in Jefferson City that are willing. They're not willing to come right out and say it, but at least they're hinting towards maybe it seems to be the hold that Scott Vaughn has or is involved in, having a hold on these people, getting a grip, getting his talons or lobbyist talons into them, and he's just like the middleman. So at some point, maybe someone's just going to come out with, as the Judas Priest song is, all guns blazing. Maybe we'll get that lucky and we'll get that type of someone who just has enough and says, you know what? Now, of course, Scott Vaughn is going to say that. Oh, he'll just laugh it off and he'll play it off like that doesn't happen. He does it already. I mean, he can't even take the fact that you're on Twitter and he says something great about Governor Parson and you tell him that, he's not much of a conservative and he says you're a freak. He called me a freak. Oh, like freaks like you, which, listen, I'll wear that as a badge of honor. Coming from someone like Scott Vaughn to call me a freak, I'm perfectly fine with that. Because anything that man says to me is not going to affect me any. He scares me about as much as a common cold. He's one of them. He's one of them. When you have the audacity to say Lincoln Huff, Caleb Rowden, Dean Plocker, John Patterson, Cindy O'Laughingstock, all these people are great conservatives. Anything you say to me is going to be taken with a grain of salt. You're a moron. You're an idiot. And you are a shill for tyrants. That's all it is. You're a shill for tyrants. And I don't have the capacity to feel compassion for you or think that you're going to hurt my feelings, because you're perfectly fine with being really super close and friendly with people who will work with the other side and do highly unconstitutional things. Now, I say that, but we have an awful lot of people that aren't in that little clique who will also act highly unconstitutional. But Scott Vaughn and some of them seem to revel in it and then pat themselves on the back as being good little conservatives or great conservatives. And Scott Vaughn, like, I'm just a simple hillbilly conservative. I'm as conservative as you can get. That's what he says. He says conservative. Well, that is not getting very conservative. That's really, really, really not conservative, like at all. Okay, but that begs the question: what is a conservative? Because if you go by today's standards of what a conservative is, it doesn't line up with the way I would think of a conservative. I would think a conservative says, I want government to be as small as possible. I see the state as a parasite, so I don't like that, and I'm going to do what I can to reduce the size of the parasite. Start starving that tapeworm. It's feeding off of everyone. I would think that's what a conservative is, or a Republican is. According to their old platform, limited government, blah, blah. Even though sometimes saying limited government seems like an oxymoron because, again, the state is a parasite and trying to limit the government seems nigh impossible. But, yeah, people, the Capitol in Jefferson City is infected. There is just a plague of corruption in that house. And I don't know how many bottles of laxatives you'd have to pump in there to get the turds to come out. It's just constipated as all get out. And that's the question of the day. What can we do as the people to get our representatives in line and operate under the confines of the Constitution? Now, is the Constitution perfect? No, and I'm not saying it's some perfect document. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that. But it's as close as we can get to a document written by highly intelligent men that if we would just demand that the politicians adhere to it and be quite strict about it, that we could operate in a much more freer society. That's all I'm saying. There's no perfect human being and there's no perfect document. But the Constitution lines it out pretty well because those guys lived through the tyranny under the King of England. They got it. They understood it. Says Tom March says, find me anyone in government employee, elected or not, who are working towards the elimination of the people in their departments or even the department. Yeah. I hear some people say we need to get rid of DESE, but I don't ever see a piece of legislation trying to do that. I get it. Now, if they tried to put that legislation through, I understand. It would probably go nowhere. In fact, it probably wouldn't even hit a committee. They'd look at it and go, what are you doing? How much crack did you smoke before you walked in the building today? But I would like to see an attempt made. I'd like somebody to try to start that fire. I'd be okay with that. I don't even see that. I don't know if they think it's because it's a waste of time, but at least you're trying. At least you're making an attempt. At least you're doing something to show the people that what you campaigned on, you actually want to work on. And give people a little faith in you and maybe your ability to act somewhat morally and constitutionally. But again, I just don't see it. I don't see it. So, what do we do in that situation? What do we do now? Because there are going to be groups that are going to keep working on different bills. There are groups that are going to be lobbying for certain things. And I know of one group, the Lockett Smith Foundation, that goes through pretty much every piece of legislation and then calculates how constitutionally every senator and every representative vote. So the proof is right there. We have people doing that right now. Tom Martz is one of them, along with some others. It's not like we have to make an effort to go out and try to. Everybody has to calculate votes. Someone's already doing it. We have to get it out there. We have to put it out there and say, hey, the guy that comes to you every 2-4 years and says they're a constitutional conservative? What's that? 39% of the time they voted constitutionally. Do you think that's a constitutional guy? 39% of the time? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with a guy lying to you every 2 or 4 years? Are you? I heard somebody on the floor yesterday saying that they needed to get rid of the term limits or change the term limits because people just can't get enough done in those 8 years. More unconstitutional. You want to steal from more people. You want to give. You want to give benefits to certain groups more because you couldn't get it done in 8 years. So give me 12. I was like, lady, as a bystander up in a gallery, I'm thinking, I like it when you guys are gridlocked and can't get anything done. Sure, I wanted to see gold and silver get through, of course. I had no faith in it because of the way those people act, leadership and some of the other reps and senators, no faith in it. They literally, some people told, because Senator Eigel's name was on it, they were like, nope, that guy's a bully, blam. So now it's like, what name do we attach it to next year? When you have people who won't vote for a constitutional bill, or at least somewhat constitutional bill, because of the name attached to it, you're going in and trying to work in an environment that is so toxic that you almost have to call a hazmat team in. It's like, so what are you supposed to do? What do you do then? What do we do then? Tom Martz says, put term limits on the bureaucracy. Yeah. You're in an appointed place, you get like 3 years, and you got to go. You can't be there for 20 years. These people get too comfortable. These people get way too comfortable in their position. As long, they may have 8 years because the government, the governor has 2 terms. They got 8 years to be there. And they feel comfortable. As long as they don't screw anything up too bad, according to the governor, 8 years. They feel so protected. I don't know. Maybe we should start electing heads of, Department of Health. And so I think maybe some of those, if any bureaucracy that has way too much appointed power, maybe those should become elected offices. Now, again, you have to have enough faith in humanity that these people research who they're voting for. But yeah, if they can only be there 2 years, 3 years, and that's it, I'm fine with recycling out. I'm fine with recycling garbage. Maybe you get somebody that are really good. But you also have to have a legislative body that maybe says, we need to just pull back. Some of these, hey, can you do something about these regulations and start rolling them back? And you have to have people who demand that too. There's a lot of people out there who are business owners, and there's a whole lot of us out there that aren't. And I think enough people that are not business owners have no idea the amount of crap that they have to go through just to operate a business in just about every state in this country, because of appointed, unconstitutional, bureaucratic bodies who are hell-bent, it seems, on making your life a living hell because you're smart enough and motivated enough to run your own business. And unless you pay your extortion fee, your license fees, this fee, that fee. You know, you got to have inspectors come in and check all the boxes off. You can't operate. That's not a free society. Casey Rich says, last year when I first asked Plocker what he thought about SB 100, the first thing he asked me is how it would affect the Federal Reserve. That pretty much tells you who runs the show. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to affect the Federal Reserve. It would be nice if it did, but at the end of the day, it's not going to affect the Federal Reserve at all. Those people are highly entrenched, and it's going to take more than one gold and silver bill in one state to put a real hurting on the Federal Reserve. It would be nice to really cramp their style a little bit, but one bill in one state's not going to do that, because that would mean you'd have to have a whole bunch of people besides like a few in Washington, D.C. to have a spine. You know, Thomas Massie is introducing a bill to end the Fed. I'm fine with that. Great. That's a constitutional bill. It's just like, in the Fed, no, short bill, language is all the same, in the Fed. Not audit the Fed, end it. And I applaud that. Now, do I expect it to go anywhere? Of course not. These people think the Federal Reserve is some benign body that's just there for the good of the people and to keep the economy steady, even though it's not very steady. You know, got to be paying attention to what the Fed does. But I appreciate the effort. At least someone's putting forth the effort to say, you know, besides Ron Paul. Ron Paul always ran on that. And Ron Paul was really wanting to get rid of the Fed, at least audit it. But, you know, there is that. All right, for those of you in the KEYK audience, thank you so much for joining me again this week. Next week, I hope you'll join me. Robert Brown, a constitutional scholar, will be joining me to talk about militias. And I think once you hear the numbers that he puts out, you're going to find it highly fascinating and mind-blowing. I know I was blown away when I heard him at the last constitutional conference that I went to in Springfield with Mr. good old Tom Martz. Really good. That was a great conference. William Feder, Robert Brown, and Chris Ann Hall all on the same stage. It doesn't get much better than that. But I hope you'll take the time to listen to that and learn from a very well-read and researched Robert Brown. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you all next week here on the Missouri Liberty Report. All right, moving on. I want to play, I'm going to change it up. I want to play this video. I got to turn the volume off because I know I got to go through a stupid ad first. Video play soon. I want you to hear this Lindsey Graham talking about Israel and the stupid thing that he said and the analogy that he used. It's special.
Does Israel need the most massive bombs that can potentially level an entire block in order to wage this war? Why can't it be more precise?
Listen, you know, here's what I would say about fighting an enemy who wants to kill you and your family. Why did we drop 2 bombs, nuclear bombs, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end a war that we couldn't afford to lose? You don't understand, apparently, what Israel is facing. They're facing 3 groups. Iran, who has received $80 billion in aid. When Trump left office, they were exporting 300 barrels of oil a day. Now they're at 1.3 million a day. They've been enriched by Biden. They're taking that money to kill all the Jews. So when we were faced with destruction as a nation after Pearl Harbor, fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. That was the right decision. Give Israel the bombs they need to end the war they can't afford to lose and work with them to minimize casualties.
Senator, that military officials would argue that there has been so much technology since those bombs were dropped that for that very reason, that is why Israel and other developed countries can be more precise. But let me ask it this way, because President Biden is not the first president to use arms shipments to try to influence Israeli policy. As you know, former President Ronald Reagan on multiple occasions withheld weapons to impact Israel's military actions. Did President Reagan show that using U.S. military aid as leverage can actually be an effective way to rein in and impact Israel's policy?
When you're telling the world you're going to restrict weapons delivery to the Jewish state who is fighting a three-front war for their survival, it emboldens Iran, it emboldens Hamas. Sinwar is probably juiced up on the idea there's daylight between the United States and Israel. The hostage deal is harder. This is the worst decision in the history of the U.S. Israel relationship to deny weapons at a time the Jewish state could be destroyed. So here's what I would say. There is some hope we can get over this. Non-negotiable, the destruction of Hamas. Nobody in Israel will allow Hamas to be standing militarily or politically when this is over. How we get there is subject to negotiation. My problem is not with the weapons that Israel is using. My problem is with the tactics that Hamas is using and the idea that America would not send a nickel of aid, echoed by a United States senator when all the Jews are trying to be killed by radical Islamic groups, tells us where we're at as a nation. The Republican Party is with Israel without apology.
Well, historians would say, why is it okay for Reagan to do it and not President Biden? But let me ask you about
why is it okay? Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Senator,
Wow. So there's Lindsey Graham. Good God almighty. He's just sitting there tapping his pen on a desk. Here, listen, I can't believe that I have to say this. Because there are people out there who don't want to believe it. We did not, as some of you know, we didn't have to drop those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Why? Because they already lost. They had already lost. They were getting ready to surrender. And what do? Nuke them anyway. And so Lindsey Graham wants to use that analogy in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The Hamas that Netanyahu has openly said he has funded that group so that Palestine will never have their own, the Palestinians will never have their own state. That's what they did. Netanyahu it has been written down, he has been heard saying, he's literally said, don't worry, we control the flame. Meaning, now, I don't think that October 7th was an inside job, right? I don't think that was it. But they are controlling, they are funding Hamas. We're funding Hamas. So we're going to fund them and then blow up thousands of innocent women and children. How do you reconcile that in your brain? How do you listen to that, what Lindsey Graham just said, and then knowing that Netanyahu and certain groups of people have been funding Hamas so that they can destabilize that area and the Palestinians will never have their own state? How can you listen to someone like Lindsey Graham and say, yes, keep funding, keep sending weapons? And then having him say, do whatever you have to do to end this war. And the Republicans are firmly behind the Jewish state. Again, as I've stated before, it seems like people in the Israeli government have captured part of our government, right? It seems as they've been captured. Oh man! Yeah, Tom March says we need to fund both sides to keep the military-industrial complex funded, right? And, of course, world banks fund both sides of war, so they keep scraping in the money. They keep making boatloads of money, funding both sides of a war. Do I think that Biden's actually going to pull back military aid for Israel? No. He's just in a pickle right now because there's an awful lot of people on the left that are tired of this conflict. Now, what's funny is they're cool with the Ukraine-Russia one. The Israel-Palestine thing, they're not okay with. So the left isn't as anti-war as they'd like you to believe. Right? They're cool with the Ukraine-Russia thing because Putin's a bad guy. We gotta go. Even though us, the U.S., not us, not me and you, our government, our Department of Defense, and NATO knew that if they kept putting countries or bringing countries into NATO, surrounding the border of Russia, at some point Putin was like, hey, I'm not going to take this much longer. We're warned about it by former prime ministers and defense people and all this. Don't do this. And we did it anyway. Provoking Putin. I'm not saying that what Putin did was right. But to sit here and act like he's just a bad man. He wants to invade Ukraine and then Poland and all these other countries because they're making stuff up. And, I'm supposed to sit here and just go, oh, yeah, just keep throwing money at proxy wars. It's great. Yeah, it's fine. Fantastic. I had a conversation with somebody at work the other day, and they think that we should keep sending military aid to Israel because of some scripture. And I'm like, I don't think scripture was written and it said, hey, the leaders of Israel can fund a terrorist organization to keep up this thing so that somebody can't have a state. I don't see that anywhere. Again, not a biblical scholar, but oh, God. Yeah, Casey Ritz says, why does everyone act like everything was hunky-dory until October 7th? Both sides were fighting when I was in grade school in the 70s. Yeah, they've been fighting for freaking ever. But this October 7th, we get people pouring fuel on the fire and getting the U.S. to get all fired up and all goony-eyed, and a bunch of people saying, well, Israel is God's country, and we can't let Okay. Do you think God's cool with people in Israel giving money to a terrorist organization and then they keep fighting? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. So why do we have to act like this is some freaking holy war? Why do people continually fall for it? That to me is one of the most silly things about this whole thing. People want to biblically make an excuse for war. I remember a pastor, John Hagee, before Iraq War II, stating that Iraq was Babylon and we had to go in and blow it up. We had mainstream big money pastors on their cable network channels saying to large audiences that Iraq was Babylon and we had to go in there and blow them up. Not very Christian. They took the government propaganda to the Christians and got them accepting the fact that we were going to fight another unconstitutional, unnecessary war. Why? Why do people fall for that? Hey, Agorizer, how you doing? But as someone who grew up in a church, I don't go to church anymore, but as someone who grew up going to church and hearing about Israel, sometimes you'd hear about, they didn't really preach on too much, but you'd hear about it. And me being a non-thinker, I was a teenager, I didn't freaking care. But now I sit back and I think about it, and I remember hearing a little bit about it as I went to church. I'm sure this is being spoken about in churches. Now, some of them might be praying for peace, but can we ask them to say, hey, we need to pray that Israel returns to actually being a religious state, maybe, and they don't think it's cool to fund the other side and put people in a concentration camp and then go blow them up with bombs indiscriminately? Can we do that? Can we pray for that? And stop acting like Israel. It's people with Israel. A lot of people act like Israel and the United States governments can just do no wrong. If they're guys in the White House, for a lot of Christians, is if there's a Republican in the White House, they can do no wrong. Israel, same way. They can just do no wrong. A, they're uneducated on the facts. They don't understand some of these things that Netanyahu and some of them's done, right? Things that were done at Camp David, stab in the back to, whatever Palestinian official or whatever. And listen, I'm not saying Hamas is good, okay? I think Hamas is a terrible organization. If they absolutely want to wipe every Jew off the face of the earth, yeah, that's freaking terrible. And if you come into another country and try to kill people, I hope your head's made into a canoe. But we also can't ignore the policies that keep these things going. Agarizer says, these wars aren't, he's got a quote here, quote, these wars aren't meant to be won, they're meant to be fought, unquote. Ernest Hancock. Didn't Ernest Hancock used to have a show on some kind of Liberty Network? I'm pretty sure Sam and Trish used to play his show. I can't remember what the name of the show was. It was a good show. Big Ron Paul guy. He had a kind of an entertaining, if it's the same guy I'm thinking about, he had a really entertaining and energetic thing about him. He was really upbeat and, energetic with the show, if that's the same guy. But anyway, I'm done with people who can't wrap their heads around that maybe these things. Tom said, maybe it's a way to manipulate voters in November. I remember, and I at the time I was a Democrat, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. Agarose says, I love Ernest. His show's called Declare Your Independence. Absolutely. That was a great show. I'm guessing he's still doing it. I don't know. It's not played on a local network anymore, but I'm sure he's still out there. But I remember when George Bush Jr. was in office, and he was up, it's coming into 2004, up for election. Now, I didn't really say it to anybody. And again, I was a Democrat, but I still wasn't paying close attention. I would just watch the morning news on CNN or whatever. Ugh, gross. Anyway, they always had that terrorist alert. And right before the election, it was always at a higher level of terrorist threat. The day after Bush won his second term, it dropped. And then a little while later, I hear Bill, because I used to watch Bill Maher. I hear Bill Maher saying the same thing, and I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't just me. That wasn't some crazy, weird thought I had. That was actually a thing. They actually did that. This could be the same way. Almeria says, read War is a Racket by General Smedley Butler. I'll have to check that one out. I got a list of books. I need to get into some Scott Horton books and some other books. I got to get some Kindle books downloaded and start doing some heavy Horton reading. But, War is a Racket, of course. Again, the World Bank's, what's the name of the book? Crap, I'm blanking out here. But there was a book about a guy who worked for World Banks and stuff, and he was talking about they'd go to these poor countries, they'd offer them loans on interest they'd offer them a loan they'd never pay back. If they rejected the loan, suddenly there was a coup and someone else was installed, and then they would take the money. But then when they took the money, then companies from the U.S. or whatever would be in there getting the oil and all these. They're just, I mean, it's happened a lot. We think these coups just like spring, the people are angry and there's just a coup. No, generally there's money from a government or some bureaucracy funding this coup because we're trying to get people installed that we like. I remember when Gaddafi was taken out in Libya, and I saw people on Facebook celebrating. I don't hear a single freaking word out of those people anymore. I don't hear anything about the state of Libya today, which is an ungodly, horrific mess. That Libya is a war-torn, just horrific country to be in. But we had to get rid of Gaddafi. So they took him out, installed some other douche canoe, and so when you look at all these examples and you're like, why do we keep going into areas? Why do we keep going in there and tearing up Jake and then pulling out and leaving it a mess, or it just regenerates back to the state it was before? Why? Because there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of blood to be spilled, and there's millions of dollars tied to that blood, millions and billions, maybe trillions of dollars tied to that blood spilled. And we have a lot of sick, degenerate individuals in the halls of power in this country and other countries, like Britain and some of the others, that are perfectly okay with that. The blood that is spilled on the ground in these countries that are not our own makes a lot of people wealthy. And then they want to portray it as these soldiers are heroes and they died for something great. They died to keep us free. Oh, man. It's just sickening. You know what? I got to pull something up here because now I don't think I've played this. Let me see. I got to pull up this audio. See if I can find it. Okay, let's see. There we go. Ron Paul, Rudy Giuliani. That's the thing I gotta. Now I gotta find the dang. Why isn't it showing up? Well, this sucks. I thought I could find it, but I'm not sure of the video. On why this exchange between Giuliani and Ron Paul, which sucks, because I really want. I see Rick Santorum but I don't see this. Well, let me see if this is it.
Hey, homeschoolers, as a fellow homeschooling...
Yeah. Get rid of the commercial.
On the president's foreign policy record or away from it?
I think you rely on your foreign policy ideas, theories, and policies, which I've laid out in articles, and I think the president got the big decision of his presidency right. The big decision that he made on September 20th, 2001, when he put us on offense against Islamic terrorism.
Okay, that's not it. It sucks because it was such a good back and forth, and Ron Paul kind of laid it bare, but I can't find the dang. Let's see. I gotta find it somewhere. Okay, this is I gotta turn the volume off. Come on. This might be it right here. Let's see.
I believe you are the only man on the stage who opposes the war in Iraq, who would bring the troops home as quickly as almost immediately, sir. Are you out of step with your party? Is your party out of step with the rest of the world? If either of those is the case, why are you seeking its nomination?
Well, I think the party has lost its way because the conservative wing of the Republican Party always advocated a non-interventionist foreign policy. Senator Robert Taft didn't even want to be in NATO. George Bush won the election in year 2000 campaigning on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing of the world. Republicans were elected to end the Korean War. The Republicans were elected to end the Vietnam War. There's a strong tradition of being anti-war in the Republican Party. It is the constitutional position. It is the advice of the founders to follow a non-interventionist foreign policy. Stay out of entangling alliances. Be friends with countries. Negotiate and talk with them and trade with them. Just think of the tremendous improvement relationships with Vietnam. We lost 60,000 men. We came home in defeat. Now we go over there and invest in Vietnam. So there's a lot of merit to the advice of the founders and following the Constitution. And my argument is that we shouldn't go to war so carelessly. When we do, the wars don't end.
Congressman, you don't think that changed with the 9/11 attack, sir?
What changed?
The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it. And they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They've already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
Wendell, may I make a comment on that? That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement as someone who lived through the attack of September 11, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11. I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists. And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're free. They come and they attack us because we're over there. I mean, what would we think if we were if other foreign countries were doing that to us?
Can I have 30 seconds, please?
No, wait a second. We'll all get 30 seconds.
They are coming.
We all want 30 seconds to talk about this.
Wendell, go ahead.
I think I'm going to turn to Senator McCain and.
Yeah, that's enough of that. But you know, he was right. Ron Paul still continues to be right all the time on our horrible foreign policy. We can't mind our own business. We can't stay out of other countries' affairs. And it gets us nowhere good. It gets us, there is nothing good that comes out, as the founders would call it, entangling alliances. Because it gets us into wars. It gets us wars. We get into wars with countries that have nothing to do with us, that have done nothing to us. You know, and when Lindsey Graham was talking about they only produced so many barrels of oil, and now they're up to this many barrels of oil, and they're using the money to kill Jews. Oh, God forbid a country pump oil out of the ground, below the ground, within its borders, and sell it. Oh, I'm not saying Iran or the people that rule in Iran are good people. But if we are going to use the excuse that they're only use this money to kill all the Jews, and if that's true, I mean, if Iran was a freer country, that money would siphon down to the people, right? And it may not. But they just come up with all these things. Iraq, wars were fought over lies that they were just in hospitals killing babies, throwing them out windows or burning, just killing babies. Wars have been premised on false statements for a long freaking time. Weapons of mass destruction. They're murdering babies, blah, blah, blah. I believe that we told Iraq that they could go into Kuwait, and then they did it, and they were like, psych. I mean, these people, they wag the dog, and they will come out publicly making false statements to incite the American people into wanting war. And we're supposed to be a Christian nation. And we have too many people who don't want to seem unpatriotic, who will publicly announce that they support the troops. And there's nothing wrong with supporting the troops. But if you're supporting the troops and you're supporting the Department of Defense and the President of the United States, when they declare these unconstitutional wars and they send these kids over to get blown up, and there's massive amounts of suicides when they come home, and people, the American government doesn't want to help them out much when they come back, you got to stop putting your faith in those people. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. To those of you in the live stream or on podcast side of things, I would ask that you check out KEYK Radio, and I would also ask that you check out MOLibertyRadio.us. Those are two local, kind of local. One's very local, and the other one's, an hour and a half away, that cover, or that play the show. Also, you should check out KSGF. Tom Martz, there's archives of his show that he does on Friday mornings at a station in Springfield, Missouri, and I would ask that you listen to Tom Martz's show as well. Listen to a lot of different shows. Get out there and get. If I'm going to suggest podcasts, I would start listening to Scott Horton, just the interviews. He puts out a lot of content. I think he's done 5,000 interviews over the span of however many years. Scott Horton's another good one, and I found part of the problem with Dave Smith and Robbie Bernstein is another great one. Trying to think, because I've been listening to Liberty Lockdown with Clint Russell is another good one. Clint Russell just had an interview in the last couple of days. Look up Liberty Lockdown. The last one they put out was with a whistleblower from Pfizer, and that's all I will say. It's about 35 minutes, mind-blowing interview. So check out Clint Russell and Liberty Lockdown. I'm just trying to put some other podcasts out there that I would recommend to you. If you like some of the things you hear here, and some of these guys are way more knowledgeable than I am. Obviously, you want to learn a lot more on foreign policy or some of these other things, definitely check some of those shows out. As far, and that goes along with Tom Woods, Good Morning Liberty, the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and John Stossel has interviews that he puts out. I think he does it 2 Mondays a month, and they're the full interviews, so he's had some great guests on there as well. So just some other podcasts that I would recommend to people out there if they want to educate themselves on and get other perspectives from other people much more intelligent than I am that are out there in the podcast world. Okay, with that being said, again, for those of you that are listening on Saturday the 18th, tomorrow night, May the 19th, I will be joining Sam and Trish Britton on Off the Cuff Radio, which you can hear from 6 to 9 p.m. Central Time every Sunday night on MOLibertyRadio.us. But I will be joining Sam Don't know what we're going to talk about because when I go on Sam's show, the show goes where it goes, and we really enjoy it. And we have a great time, and we hope that you enjoy it as well. All right, folks, take care, everybody. Have a great week. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'm all screwed up because this is Saturday. I'm so used to recording on Fridays. But have a great rest of your weekend and a great week, and we'll see you back here next week with constitutional scholar Robert Brown right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.